The Justice Department is reportedly investigating a city's rejection of a planned mosque in Bayonne, New Jersey. Officials will probe if the zoning board properly denied the proposal. Last week, the group looks to build the mosque filed a federal lawsuit against the city. Now, the probe was announced on the same day that another New Jersey municipality agreed to a settlement of $3.25 million for illegally rejecting a mosque. Joining us right now is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, good to see you.
Good to see you. So we do have two cases
here. Cases.
There's a case in Bedminster, New Jersey, in which the Obama Justice Department filed a lawsuit against the town, arguing that it used different standards for deciding whether to rezone a neighborhood for a mosque than it had used to rezone a neighborhood for a church. And that case was settled yesterday for $3.5 million. The bulk of the settlement going to attorney's fees, rather than to the people who were actually harmed by this. But the end result is that the mosque will be built as planned. The case was not tried before a federal judge. The Justice Department persuaded the town that it would lose, and it probably should cough up the money. The attorney's fees don't go to the government. The attorney's fees go to the lawyers for the mosque.
Yeah,
the new
it says $1.5 million in damages.
Yeah, it's an interesting case because it was filed by the Obama Justice Department and settled by the Trump Justice Department. There's no U.S. attorney in New Jersey, so this was not settled by a person appointed by Donald Trump. This was settled by career lawyers still in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. The case in Bayonne is just beginning, and in this case, the Trump administration initiated the lawsuit. Did the city use a different standard when deciding to deny a zoning approval for the construction of a mosque than it used for the construction of other religious structures? We'll see where it goes. It's a problem in the United States today. Where does it come from? Well, you can read the headline.
It's a problem, meaning the cities or certain localities are not putting mosques up? Or what's the problem that you're saying?
The problem that the Justice Department is concerned about is an institutional bias against Muslims and using the power of the government to make it more difficult for them to worship. You know, we have a First Amendment which requires that the government not use religion for any test whatsoever.
Yeah.
So if it's going to use a set of standards for changing a residential neighborhood to the construction of a church, it has to use the same set of standards for changing a residential neighborhood for the construction of a mosque.
Yeah,
that seems fair, right?
Yeah, it does seem fair.
Yes, it's not only fair, it's dictated by the Supreme Court.
What about the president's travel order? Attorney General Jeff Sessions vowing to fight the federal appeals court decision announced late last week over the so-called travel ban. Then the DOJ could file their first appeal as soon as this week. What is the likelihood, Judge, that the Supreme Court hears this case?
You know, it's really into the weeds at this point because we have another case in California, and the Supreme Court wouldn't hear just the one from Richmond, Virginia. It would hear both. So the Fourth Circuit has ruled against President Trump. I think we can confidently predict that the Ninth Circuit will rule against President Trump. And so you'll have two circuits enjoining the president. Should that go to the Supreme Court? The answer is yes and no. The reason for yes is because the president needs to have clarity as to what his power is to affect foreign policy. I have argued that he has the absolute authority under the Constitution and under a federal statute to do this. The two appellate courts disagree. The reason for no is these cases are not final decisions. They are rulings on preliminary injunctions. And the Supreme Court rarely gets involved in the preliminary stage. What does that mean? That means that these two cases, assuming the Ninth agrees with the Fourth, will have to go back to the trial courts for a trial, a jury trial as to whether Donald Trump violated the Constitution, and those cases have to make their way up to the Supreme Court.
And they've been looking at what he said on the campaign trail to do it.
Both the Fourth Circuit, and I can confidently predict the Ninth, are using the incendiary language of candidate Trump against President Trump. If you read the order, just the document, it is sound on the law. If it had been signed by George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, it would have been upheld by any federal court in the land.
Isn't this what matters, though?
Yes, but because this in my hypothetical, the order,
Right.
is so adverse to the language he used when he was candidate Trump, the courts cannot resist the temptation to take that language and undermine the order by saying, even though on its face it appears neutral, it's really anti-Muslim.
That's judicial overreach.
It is probably judicial overreach. It's very disheartening for those of us who follow this and believe in the rule of law. That judges can characterize something that is clearly within the president's authority as anti-Muslim and thereby invalidate it.
Now, does that mean the previous administration and Barack Obama's order is gone? It's not effective because he did have a ban as well that targeted a lot of the same nations.
It had a time limit to it, and
it did.
It's over. It's interesting.
Okay.
This has only a 90-day time limit. If the courts hadn't gotten involved, this would be over with and be history by now. Now, he could have renewed it, but it only had a 90-day time limit.
Okay.
Wow. They really fight him on every
Yes,
turn.
they do fight him on every turn, from this horrible Kathy Griffin stuff to the more sophisticated appellate court argument. The resistance, if you listen to Hillary Clinton's Wellesley speech, as I know you did, Guy, the resistance believes it's triumphant. They believe they're driving him crazy.
That's you mentioned that Kathy Griffin issue. That's the first covered by the First Amendment, but we should point out that the Secret Service has tweeted about this.
Well, you know,
not directly, but
the Secret Service has an obligation. I don't think
to follow up.
Yeah, I don't think Kathy Griffin has a personal threat to the president, but I don't blame the Secret Service for their tweets.
It's not just what she says triggers other nuts.
Correct. What she says, of course, is horrific, but it is protected speech.
Threats made against Secret Service protectees receive the highest priority of all of our investigations.
Yeah, they're exactly right. That's their job under the law.
There you go. Judge, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Judge Andrew Napolitano there.